anti-Semite. This is the fundamental problem.
You just heard a U.S. ambassador call New York City's mayor an anti-Semite live in front of Congress. That mayor is Zohran Mamdani, and this fight started with a video he released about a very specific question. What happens if Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visits New York while an international criminal court warrant for his arrest exists? Mamdani said he would want it enforced. Congress exploded. But before you pick a side, there's something both sides agree on that almost never gets said out loud in either camp. Stay tuned, because what the U.S. ambassador to the UN says about the legal reality will leave you speechless.
Hey, how's it going?
I have two questions.
Okay.
One is about Mr. Netanyahu, and the other is about Council criticism. Regarding your latest announcement, your video on the arrest of Mr. Netanyahu,
Would you mind if we give you the mic? Thank you.
Some Jewish groups have noted that in your video, you didn't include a reference to October 7th or Hamas leaders who carried out that attack. And it's not easy always to pin you down on this subject, forgive me, but because there aren't many perfect analogies to draw. For instance, not all world leaders or alleged war criminals have ICC warrants, or they're not planning to come to the UN General Assembly, or perhaps they're dead. So my question is that, would you, if circumstances were different, would you have vowed to arrest the leaders of Hamas who perpetrated the October 7th attack if they were visiting New York? And if so, why not include something about that to show New Yorkers that, you know, you're presenting a more balanced approach? Why not include that in your video?
Didn't the ICC put forward a warrant for Yahya Sinwar?
I mean, I know he's dead. Yeah.
Yes, but my point is that they did. And in the video, I made very clear, as I have before, that my interest in executing that warrant is not specific to Benjamin Netanyahu, but to anyone who they put a warrant towards for war crimes and crimes against humanity. And part of that is a reflection of a universal politics. And it is from a universal politics that I can look in October 7th and describe it for what it is, which is a horrific war crime. And I can also look at Benjamin Netanyahu and see the way that he has orchestrated this genocide and also deem him to similarly be a war criminal. And I think especially at a time when there are those in Washington who are discussing measures to take apart the International Criminal Court, what so many are looking for is a sense that there is in fact a rule of law across the world where there are crimes that are so grave that
Let's be precise about what Mamdani actually said, because the clip captures more nuance than the headlines that followed it. He wasn't asked to comment on Netanyahu specifically at first. A reporter pressed him on why his video didn't mention October 7th or Hamas leaders. Mamdani's response was that the ICC had in fact already issued a warrant for Hamas commander Yahya Sinwar, and that his position applies to anyone under an ICC warrant for war crimes, not Netanyahu alone. He used the word genocide to describe Netanyahu's actions in Gaza. That is Mamdani's characterization, not a legal finding. No international court has issued a genocide conviction in this conflict, though a genocide case brought by South Africa against Israel is pending at the International Court of Justice, a separate body from the ICC. To be fair to Mamdani, his stated position that any ICC warrant should be enforced regardless of who it names is at least internally consistent with international law as written, even if you disagree with the ICC's legitimacy itself. But that consistency is exactly what the reaction on Capitol Hill challenged directly.
Zohran Mamdani was up to this week. Instead of working to lower costs for New Yorkers, Zohran spent the week trying to figure out how to arrest Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And after days of using his taxpayer-funded lawyers to examine this nonsense, he released a scripted video filled with propaganda, sharing what we knew from the start, which is that he doesn't have the legal authority to arrest a democratically elected prime minister. Ambassador, can you confirm for all of us that Mr. Mamdani does not have the authority to arrest Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Yes, I can, Congressman, and it is, as is probably one of the only Floridians actually moving the other direction into New York now. Well, I'll leave that commentary aside. To answer your question directly, the United States is not a party to the Rome Statute, which underpins the International Criminal Court, which is a corrupt organization who had just had to fire its head prosecutor for sexual abuse and assault after he chased or is chasing after the Prime Minister Netanyahu with prosecution. Number one, we're not a party. We don't have authority of the ICC. There is head of state immunity, and under the UN headquarters agreement, heads of state are allowed to come and go to the UN General Assembly. But the bigger picture is, why isn't he so adamant about the thugs that come in and out from Iran or from North Korea or from others as he is about Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Not only that, he was opposed to the arrest and capture of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro, who was twice indicted by our own court system. The Southern District of New York twice indicted him, and Zohran called for his release. Meanwhile, he wants to arrest a duly elected prime minister of an ally based on the International Criminal Court.
Set the rhetoric aside for a moment and look at just the legal claim Ambassador Waltz made, because it's actually accurate on its own terms. The United States is not a party to the Rome Statute, the treaty that created the ICC. That means the U.S. doesn't recognize the court's jurisdiction, and under the UN headquarters agreement, heads of state are generally guaranteed safe passage to and from the UN General Assembly regardless of other legal disputes. A New York City mayor has no independent authority to execute an international arrest warrant under U.S. law. On the narrow legal question, Waltz is correct. Here's what the clip doesn't fully resolve, though. Lawler raised the Maduro comparison, noting Mamdani had opposed the capture of Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro despite a U.S. indictment. Whether that's a fair parallel, one is a U.S. domestic indictment, the other an ICC warrant the U.S. doesn't recognize, is a real question reasonable people can disagree on. And Waltz's closing line, calling Mamdani an anti-Semite, is a serious accusation that Mamdani has publicly and repeatedly denied, including in his own campaign. That's a characterization from one side of this fight, not a settled fact, and we're not going to present it as one. This is a genuine disagreement over law, politics, and language. It didn't get resolved in this hearing room. And Waltz wasn't done for the day either. Later in that same House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing, a different member came at him over a completely different fight.
The Republican-controlled Foreign Affairs Committee would know how to use audio next time, but we did see the video, and it showed multiple missiles hitting this base in Jordan. Let me tell you what happened. It was disclosed later that 2 U.S. troops died in that strike from a purportedly obliterated Iranian military, and this is what Donald Trump said. He said that the Iranians, quote, did slip something through in Jordan, and if we had other operators, it would not have happened. He then went on to say, when you let other people do your job, with the United States, we let other people do a job, and sometimes it doesn't work out so well. So let me ask you this question. Do we still have American troops stationed in Jordan right now?
Doesn't surprise me that you're referring to Al Jazeera. In terms of your video, I'm here as the UN ambassador, but I'm happy to refer you to Pete Hegseth, Secretary Hegseth's testimony yesterday. Of course, we still have.
In your opening statement, you bragged about doing a Security Council resolution on Iran. So yes, Iran is in your job responsibility. Focus on it and focus on the troops that have been wounded and killed. Do not be so callous with the safety and lives of American troops. I'm going to ask you again: Are U.S. troops currently stationed? Are U.S. troops currently stationed in Jordan?
Moralized to me. Go back
Are U.S. troops currently stationed in Jordan?
Try to get reelected.
I will.
You should try.
November is coming for you and this administration. Are U.S. troops stationed in Jordan? It's not even a trick question. Are they?
Of course they are.
Okay.
With a great ally.
And if Donald Trump doesn't trust the Jordanians to protect U.S. troops, do you trust them? Who are we going to have protect U.S. troops? They are exposed right now in the Middle East, repeatedly
hear this
being
from you
exposed to
in the last-
Iranian missiles
when they
and
died under the
missile
Biden
strikes and
administration.
drones. You don't even know how many U.S. troops were wounded
And did
in this
nothing
Iran
about
war. Shame on you for not even know
Died
basic
under the Biden
facts.
administration.
You are the U.S. ambassador,
Iran,
and you
and
don't
you
even know how many U.S. troops were wounded in the Iran war. You got that wrong.
Last
You should be
administration, and now you
shameful.
got-
You don't know basic facts.
Because it's
You
Donald
should
Trump.
resign.
You're trying-
Notice this wasn't the Mamdani fight anymore. Same witness, same hearing, same afternoon, completely different subject. Lieu was pressing on a specific claim that 2 American troops died in a missile strike on a base in Jordan, information he says came out only after the fact, and that Trump had publicly suggested the deaths were partly due to relying on Jordanian forces instead of American ones. Waltz's response was to question Lieu's source rather than answer the troop count question directly at first, before eventually confirming U.S. troops remain stationed in Jordan. To be fair, confirming exact casualty figures during an active conflict is genuinely difficult, and initial battlefield reports are frequently revised as more information comes in. That's not unique to this administration. But here's the pattern worth noticing across both exchanges in this single hearing. Twice in one afternoon, a direct factual question, who has legal authority, how many troops were wounded, got met with a counter-accusation instead of a direct answer. Once the word was anti-Semite. The second time it was a question about where Lieu gets his news. Neither exchange resolved the underlying question either side was actually asking. Step back and look at the full picture. In one afternoon, one ambassador faced 2 separate fights. On Mamdani, a newly elected mayor made a legal argument about international law that is internally consistent, even if you find the ICC itself illegitimate. The ambassador's countering legal argument about American sovereignty was factually accurate. Somewhere in between, the actual disagreement got buried under an accusation neither side can fully prove. On Jordan, a member of Congress asked how many American troops were wounded. He got a question about his news sources back instead. So we'll ask you directly, and we genuinely want to know, when direct questions get met with counter-accusations instead of answers, twice in one hearing, does that tell us more about these 2 specific fights, or about how Washington handles hard questions generally? Drop your take in the comments. Hit subscribe if you want us tracking where this goes next, because this one is far from over.